The sentence came flat, like a line item. Due to restructuring, your position is being eliminated, Claudia Voss said, eyes never leaving her tablet. A clean room, white walls, a clock that seemed louder than it should be. Security waited just outside the door, close enough to hear the scrape of my chair. 19 years, measured out in fiscal quarters, now reduced to a calendar invite and a 3-paragraph script. I kept my face still. 60 seconds of silence is an ocean in a conference room. Ethan Cole cleared his throat, slid a cardboard box toward me like it was a favor. Key card, parking pass. His tone had that professional pity you hear at airports when flights are canceled. Efficient grief. I placed my key card on the table. A small plastic square, worn edges from a decade and a half of doors. I kept the leather portfolio tucked under my arm. My wife had given it to me 15 years ago, when haircuts were still a choice and not a concession. Before chemo, before the house fell quiet between appliances, the portfolio had outlived the flowers from her funeral. Inside it, a flash drive waited. 3 years of the numbers that didn't add up, and the people who insisted they did. Is there anything you'd like to say, Michael? Claudia asked, as if there might be an exit interview for dignity. Her fingers tapped the table, manicured moons catching the light. I thought of all the things numbers won't say for you. No, I said. Thank you for the opportunity. Words we use to keep rooms from breaking. Noah Briggs, the security guard, walked me back to my office. He looked younger in this light. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale, he whispered, as if the walls could fire him too. Not your doing, Noah, I said, wrapping a framed photo in tissue, the one where my wife is laughing with the sun straight in her face, unafraid of squinting. I placed it gently into the box, like setting down a memory that still breathes. The office had that end of project stillness, desk plants with their brave green, a cup holding pens that never run out until you need them. I left the keycard on the blotter. I kept the portfolio close. Claudia and Ethan believed they were pruning the old wood. What they didn't know, the rings in the trunk remember every winter. I had kept ledgers inside the ledger, backups of backups, timestamps like footprints in fresh snow. In the lobby, colleagues studied their shoes. The modern ritual solidarity by looking away. HR calls it respecting privacy. Sociologists have a term for it too, bystander effect. Everyone's waiting for someone else to move first. I stepped through the glass doors into afternoon heat and air that didn't belong to the company. In the parking lot, I let myself smile, small and private. They saw a man carrying a box. I felt a weight lift from a different place. They thought I was leaving with nothing. I was leaving with what they'd worked so hard to bury. Numbers, honest as winter. People, not always. I set the box on the passenger seat, the portfolio on top. I started the car. The engine turned, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere inside, a voice I trusted, older, kinder, reminded me, the job is to make sure the numbers tell the truth. The rest is noise. The first 15 years at Northvale felt like a long, clean column of figures, tidy, legible, righteous. Harold Whitaker ran the place with habits that predated slide decks. He walked the floor before coffee, fingertip on a newly machined edge, asking after coolant levels and birthdays. He liked to say the line ran on math and mercy. If a part failed inspection, it failed. No discounts for charm. Numbers tell the truth, Michael, he'd say, standing under the clatter. People try. Your job is to keep us honest when we forget how. After Harold retired, the sale papers arrived like rain on a clear day. Venture money, sharp suits, cheerful optimism, yield targets tucked inside their smiles. For a while, the changes wore soft shoes. Maintenance cycles stretched just this quarter. Materials sourced from regional partners I'd never heard of. The language of efficiency seeped into staff meetings. Optimization, transition, synergy. Words that seemed to tidy a room while stealing the furniture. Claudia Voss landed with her global credentials and a growth deck that glowed. Ethan followed half a year later, evangelizing culture like a subscription service. At first, I gave them the courtesy of benefit. I'd been the cautionary tale in enough young rooms to know not to become one too soon. Then, the first quarter closed under their watch. The vendor ledger blinked at me. Payments that didn't match received inventory. Line items tied to purchase orders without corresponding bills of lading. I flagged them, footnoted the discrepancies, sent a careful email. Claudia replied with a smile and punctuation. "We're transitioning suppliers. It'll balance out." It didn't. My follow-ups fell into the polite silence modern companies keep for inconvenient facts. Then the consulting fees began. Everite Partners, registered to an address that mapped to a mailbox store, and later I'd learn an in-law's home office. Executive retreats appeared on calendars like parades. Expense reports doubled up, triple-dipped, approved faster than a macro could run. None of it big enough alone to snap a board awake. Together, like hairline fractures in a bridge, I started keeping a second ledger. Not creative accounting, honest accounting, that didn't fit the new story. I saved copies, printed PDFs to avoid revisions, captured system logs at 11:59 p.m. when edits leave footprints. Not because I had a plan, because habit is a moral compass when courage sleeps. Because Harold's voice still had a chair in my head. In the hallways, the air shifted. Younger hires, bright, good people, many of them moved fast. But the promotions moved faster toward those with the right lunches. Veterans found their desks relocated to corners where projects go to fade. Caleb, from purchasing, whispered that invoices were multiplying like shadows. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Realignment, the mass email said, as if that word tucked bread into a lunchbox. At home, Anna watched me live at the office from the kitchen table. "You're working late every night, Dad." I told her it was close season. She stared like a lawyer, which is to say, like a daughter who knows the taste of a half-truth. I rinsed my mug too carefully and promised nothing out loud. The house kept its counsel. The spreadsheets did not. The house met me with its old, careful quiet. I set the cardboard box on the counter, next to the bowl where I used to leave my ring when hospital soap cracked my hands. I poured 2 fingers of the good whiskey. I wasn't celebrating. I needed the slow heat to round the edges. Outside, the neighborhood did its afternoon chores. Inside, time slipped its watch off. I opened the box. A stapler. 2 pens. I liked more than I should have. A mug with the Northvale logo flaking off like a bad promise. On top, the framed photograph of Lena, eyes closed in sunlight, laughing at something I wish I could remember again on command. The room changed temperature just looking at her. I set the photo on the desk in my small office, angled so she could pretend to read over my shoulder. The phone rang. Anna. Tina messaged me. "Dad, what happened?" Her voice, trained to slide into triage. I offered the script. Restructuring. Position eliminated. The safest words in America. "That's nonsense," she said. 19 years doesn't end like a coupon. I could hear papers moving, the sound of a mind reaching for statutes. "We should file." I closed my eyes. "No lawsuits," I said softly. "Not this time." Silence stretched, then softened. "Then tell me what you need." I told her I'd think on it, which we both knew meant I already had. We said we loved each other. We meant it twice. After, I powered up my home computer. The flash drive clicked into place like a key. Folders opened. Clean rows of dates, incident types, dollar amounts. Evidence breathing with its own rhythm. I started a new document. Not an indictment, not a speech. Just the truth standing up. Times, transfers, invoices that appeared without goods, approvals with no approvers, the Everite payments pooling in the same small mailbox on the edge of town. I typed like a bookkeeper of weather, noting each front as it broke. I added the email addresses for the SEC and the State Attorney General into the recipient field. Watched the cursor pulse like a throat. My finger hovered over send. It would be so easy to let gravity do it. So hard to live inside the collapse once it began. A company is not a spreadsheet. It is the men on the press, the woman at the mill, the kid on second shift saving for night classes. If the tree falls, the birds fall with it. I closed the laptop. The room went back to being just a room. I pulled a faded album from the shelf. Harold at his retirement party, tie loosened, eyes wet in private ways. The old team in paper crowns at a holiday lunch. Me and Lena at the company picnic, her scarf turning in the wind like a small flag. What would you do? I asked the picture, ridiculous and holy. I already knew. Lena had a simple rule that never learned how to bend. Do the right thing. Let the noise tire itself out. I slept badly. The kind of night where memory replays with captions. But something moved by morning. Shock thinned into a line I could walk. This wasn't about my job anymore, not my pride, not even my grief. It was about the numbers and who gets to make them lie. I showered, knotted a tie out of habit, and dialed the number I had been carrying for years like a spare key. David, I said when he answered. It's Michael Hale. I need to show you something. David answered on the second ring, the way old friends do when your name is a weather report. I gave him the short of it, first the pattern, the shell vendors, the approvals that signed themselves at 11:58 p.m. Bring what you have, he said, voice steady, a lawyer's ballast. And Michael, start a log. Every call, every bump in the night. He texted a time, a building with beige carpet and tired fluorescents that make honesty look unremarkable. I printed what couldn't be altered and encrypted what could. Then, I waited for the counterpunch. It arrived faster than mail. A certified letter from Northvale's legal department severance, offer stapled to a non-disclosure the size of a novella. 3 months' pay for 19 years, contingent on silence that reached backward and forward, like a hand over a mouth. I called Anna. She skimmed, hummed, turned sharp. This is overbroad, she said. It's meant to scare you into cheap quiet. I asked what happened if I didn't sign. They'll snarl about unemployment, vacation, payout. It's leverage theater. I thanked her. I didn't tell her I'd already made my choice. The doorbell rang at 4, sunlight leaning long across the floorboards. Claudia stood on my porch with a smile that never found her eyes. She wore kindness like a rental. May I come in? She asked, stepping past the word. In the living room, she placed a fresh packet on the table, same agreement, new number handwritten on the corner. We can extend to 5 months if you sign today. She said today, the way salespeople say, end of quarter. What's the rush? I asked. Board timelines, she said lightly. Budget lock, vendor cleanup. We want everything neat. I watched her face while I spoke. Westbrook invoices, I said softly. The ones that posted without matching receipts. The smile held, but the muscles beneath went still. Clerical errors, already addressed. And Everite Partners? I said. The consulting firm that lives in a mailbox and shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office. The room cooled. The smile set down its cup. I'd be very careful with accusations, she said. Especially when you may have removed company property. That's theft, Michael. I kept copies of my work product, I said, as the handbook allows. She stood. You have until tomorrow. After that, your retirement picture gets complicated. She left citrus and threat in the air. The text came an hour later, from a number that wore a mask. Back off if you know what's good for you. We know about the drive. A dark sedan idled across my street through dinner. By morning, my bank called about failed login attempts with my social. Subscription confirmations stacked in my inbox for services I hadn't imagined. Not subtle. But then subtle isn't the point. It was choreography. Show of reach. Show of appetite. I called David. They're pushing, I said. Hard. Expected, he answered. And instructive. Send me everything, the letter, the text, the bank's notice. Log the car. The pattern is evidence. He paused, and in the quiet I heard what he didn't say. This is bigger than sloppiness. We'll move, he added. But we'll need more than a clean ledger. Someone inside. I looked at the portfolio on my desk, felt the room tilt toward a familiar cliff. The numbers were ready to speak. We needed a voice behind the door. I spent the next day learning how quiet can make a sound. The sedan returned, 2 houses down, windows dark. It didn't need to be closer. Presence was the message. I wrote it in the log David told me to keep. Time, license partial, the weather like a witness. I added the small things too: mail slot clatter, a click at the edge of my Wi-Fi, a motion alert from the back fence where no branch moved. When fear is patient, it sets the table with crumbs. David called from a corridor that echoed. Your files are strong, he said, but they'll call them anomalies. We need someone who's seen the edits before they dry. He meant an insider whose badge still works and whose courage can't be outsourced. I knew what that ask costs. Inside an organization, dissent feels like breaking a vow you never got to write. I tried to work as if it were just another close. I made tea because coffee felt too combative. I backed up the backups, then printed a set for a banker's box I labeled in the plainest hand I own. I called my insurance provider to enable the fraud flag and pretended the hold music was normal. I changed passwords and sat with the strange modern fact that our lives now swing on strings we cannot see. In the evening, Anna brought groceries I hadn't asked for. She set them down like evidence. I hate the car, she said. I hate that I know what to do with a car. We ate soup at the counter, the easy kind with too much salt. She told me about a case and then stopped herself, seeing I was elsewhere. You're not alone, she said, which is both true and something we have to keep saying or it spoils. I nodded. I know. She reached for the logbook, read the clean lines. You always did write like a ledger could testify. Night lay over the house in careful sheets. I walked the rooms like a watchman paid in memory. The photo of Lena caught a slice of streetlight and for a second looked alive, the way light grants reprieve. I asked her nothing. The answer is always the same. Do the right thing, even when the room is empty. Near midnight, I opened the second ledger and traced each anomaly with a fingertip, like reading Braille to learn a city by feel. In another life, these would be errors to fix. In this life, they were coordinates. Still, David was right. Numbers can point. A person has to say, I saw. I thought of the folks at the plant, the careful hands, the jokes at lunch, the way pride smells like cutting oil and orange cleaner. The damage would find them first if we failed. I wrote a list of names I trusted and crossed most of them out. Not because they were unworthy, because I wouldn't ask anyone to stand where I wouldn't stand myself. When I slept, it was shallow and brief. When I woke, I knew who I would call. Not because she was fearless, because she was tired of being careful for other people's lies. We chose my brother's cabin because the road to it forgets your tires as soon as you pass. A 1-lane ribbon an hour out of the city, cottonwoods leaning in like old men who know what to keep to themselves. I arrived early, opened windows, let the place trade its stale breath for creek air. On the table, I laid out nothing. I wanted no paper she hadn't carried herself. Marisol pulled in 10 minutes late, which for her meant she'd circled twice to be sure she wasn't followed. She came in quick, eyes sweeping corners the way people do when loyalty has started to feel like bad weather. I don't have long, she said, hands already in her bag. They think the audit is a mop. It's a paintbrush. Thank you watching to mine there. She set a small flash drive between us, like a candle we didn't dare light. They brought in consultants from Ethan's old firm, she said. They're not checking, they're backfilling backdated approvals, inserted change orders, fake chain of custody trails. And they forgot something I wish I didn't know. The system logs. They still have me using your old credentials. Her mouth made a short, tired smile. I've been taking snapshots before and after. Every correction leaves a fingerprint. We worked in an honest silence while she opened her laptop. The screen showed pairs of screenshots, columns, and rows that looked identical until you caught the small betrayal. A timestamp that now claimed to be Tuesday when it had been Saturday. An approver ID that used to belong to a man who retired last spring. "They'll call it clerical," she said, "but clerical doesn't know how to travel back in time." Then the larger pieces. Government contracts billed above cost with expedite, surcharges that never occurred. Certification PDFs for safety tests that didn't match the raw lab data. "Look," she said, pulling a thread I didn't see at first. Same document number, different hash. A counterfeit twin wearing the right badge. The inventory module showed goods that existed only in presentations, propping valuation like a stack of boxes with nothing in them. I asked the question that had been pacing my head. "The pension fund." She nodded. "The slow kind that means I wish I were wrong. Internal interfund loans booked as temporary sweeps, real cash, quiet exits. They've been using it to keep liquidity pretty for the sale. If the deal closes, there's not enough to pay what was promised. A map of the future no one could afford." We sat with that a moment, listening to birds work the trees as if industry were still simple. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Executive team," she said. "And maybe one other." She hesitated. "Ryan, from Quality, started asking about test variances last month. Then he disappeared. HR says he resigned, but his badge never checked out, and his desk was cleared at midnight." The room cooled in a way the weather couldn't explain. I wrote his name in my log, block letters, as if neatness could keep a man safe. "You're risking your job," I said, which felt too small for what this was. She laughed without humor. "They're cutting me next month. I learned that reading a thread I wasn't supposed to see." She pushed the drive toward me. "I can keep pulling logs a little longer, but they're tightening access." I sealed the drive in an envelope with the same care you give to a photograph you only get to touch once. "We'll move," I said, "carefully, and soon." She looked out the window at the creek and nodded. "Do it faster than they do." When she left, the cabin felt emptied of something heavier than air. I labeled the envelope in small letters, dated the log, and folded the fear into an action. "Call David, now." On the drive back, I passed a turnout where the trees opened like a curtain. For a moment I could see the city far off, indifferent and blinking. Somewhere inside it, a man had asked the wrong questions and gone silent. The road narrowed. I kept it between the lines. By dawn, I was all lists. I moved like a man who has decided to move. No drama, just sequence. First, I made 3 of everything. Marisol's logs, my ledgers, the screenshots that contradicted the self-correcting past. 1 set in a banker's box for a safety deposit at a bank where Northvale didn't shake hands. 1 set sealed and labeled for Anna with a note she wasn't allowed to open unless I failed to answer 2 calls in a row. The third, encrypted with a key I wrote out on paper, went to David by courier. I texted him the half-key hours later, like passing a map in pieces through a crowd. Then I started stitching the human pattern. I called Caleb. We met at a diner far enough away that no one would accidentally wave. He looked smaller without his badge, as if the building had once made him taller. "I found the same rot," he said, fingers tracing condensation on his glass. Asked a few questions. Next morning, I'm a policy violation. A week later, his house had been quietly entered. Nothing taken but the laptop, a folder of receipts. He'd filed a police report. I copied the case number into my log like a bead onto a string. 2 more former colleagues answered my messages with the same tired relief. They told me about projects that vanished from tracking at 90% completion, about safety concerns that moved into a folder labeled pending and never moved out. Each story, a small lamp in a dark hall. Together they described a corridor long enough to run. David called from an office that sounded shut. "The interest is official," he said. "We're preparing affidavits. But for the pension sweep and for their claim that it's all fixed now, we need current records. The word current carried a weight we both felt. Asking Marisol for more would tax her courage past the line she had already crossed. I set the phone down and stared at the spot where Lena's frame caught the light. She wouldn't have flinched at a cost that saved others. It's easier to be brave for the dead. My phone rang again, a number I didn't know. Michael. The voice was rasped thin. It's Ryan. I stepped outside, street heat lifting off the asphalt. Are you safe? I asked, a breath, not quite a laugh. Define safe. He rushed, as if time were a door someone was holding shut. Bentonville contract. Compare certifications to raw test data. They're passing parts that failed. Military vehicles. The word ruined the air. They threatened my family, he said, voice breaking and hardening in the same second. I'm leaving town. Someone needs to stop them before someone dies. The line clicked into silence. I called David back before the dial tone finished waking. He didn't ask me to repeat it. I'm looping in DOD, he said. This escalates now. Hours later, I sat across from two investigators who looked like the government's memory. They offered protection that sounded like moving into a different version of my name. I shook my head. I have an idea, I said. Something that brings them to a room they think they own. At night, the sedan didn't return, which felt worse. It meant the next move was theirs or mine, if I made it first. I called Claudia in the morning and let defeat color my voice, a light wash, believable. I've reconsidered, I said. The severance, the NDA. I'd like to be done. Relief came through the line thin as steam. Wise, she said. Come in tomorrow, we'll finalize. I coughed up a preference. Not the office. Neutral space. Lakeside Hotel has small meeting rooms, quiet. A pause. I pictured her measuring risk against convenience, choosing the mask she'd wear. Fine, she said, 9 a.m. By 8:30, I was in a chair outside the Magnolia Room, a place designed to be forgettable. Beige carpet, art that looked like it survived a committee. Someone down the hall poured coffee with the care of a person who'd never had to lie for a living. I straightened my tie out of muscle memory and touched the folded sheet in my pocket. Questions scripted like measurements. The rest of the building looked ordinary. It wasn't. Doors you couldn't tell from other doors had ears. The room we'd rent had more than a view. It had a witness. Claudia arrived at 8:57 with a lawyer who wore his haircut like a credential. She carried a leather folio that matched the one on my kitchen desk in everything but history. We shook hands in the way people do when they're already somewhere else. Papers slid to the center, the NDA on top, pages fat with future silence. A check clipped like a consolation prize. 5 months, she said, and a neutral reference. The lawyer added words like routine and closure. I let the script run until it asked for my pen. Before I sign, I said, clarifications. The lawyer smiled the way you smile at a man you think you've already bought. I kept my voice mild. This agreement covers all company matters, yes, including the pension fund interfund loans, including the Bentonville military contract. The lawyer turned a page he didn't need to turn. All company matters, he said. Claudia's smile didn't move, but the muscles behind it calculated. I nodded, reached for the pen, then set it down as if I'd remembered a grocery item. And federal crimes, I said, ordinary as rain. This would release me from reporting those? The air thinned. The lawyer leaned in. What crimes, Mr. Hale? I stood, palms flat on the table so I wouldn't clench them. Fraud, I said softly. Embezzlement, criminal endangerment, government overbilling, certification, tampering. I've already provided evidence to federal authorities. I glanced at the painting on the wall, a lake that wasn't this one, and somewhere beyond it, a door opened. David entered as if he'd always been in the building, flanked by 2 FBI agents and 2 from DOD, faces like paperwork that had learned to walk. Miss Voss, one agent said, voice plain. We have a warrant to search Northvale facilities and seize records related to government contracts and pension management. The lawyer began a sentence that died on the first word. Claudia reached for her phone. An agent's hand appeared, courteous and final. David set a folder on the table. Copies. Not all of it, never all at once. Parallel actions are underway, he said. Mr. Cole is being detained. Members of the board as well. Claudia's smile emptied. For a moment she looked like anyone who has watched the ground remember it is not a floor. I felt no triumph, only the clean click of a lock finally meeting its key. I didn't wait for the part where wrists learned what metal felt like. My work in that room was over the moment truth had a microphone. Outside, the lake decided not to be dramatic. It just lay there, reflecting what it was given. I called Anna and told her I'd be home late. Good late? She asked. The best kind, I said. The kind that keeps people safe. 6 months makes a different weather. Headlines cooled, then wandered off to newer fires. But inside our town you could feel the story settling into the walls. Northvale went into receivership first, an ungainly word for a necessary pause. The investigators did what investigators do. Boxes, badges, chain of custody stickers, like tiny bandages. The plant lights still came on at dawn, but fewer were bright. Paychecks landed, late once, then righted. People learned to talk with their hands again in the break room, softer, as if sound could bruise. When the math finally cleared, the manufacturing division stood there, durable as a workbench. The service lines could be sold for parts. The line was a heart that insisted on beating. A small miracle stitched itself together in public meetings and after school, gyms operators, machinists, schedulers, and a handful of managers who had never forgotten what a bill of materials felt like under the skin. With help from a state economic development fund and a union credit program I hadn't known existed, they bought the place where their fathers had taught them to tie laces. They renamed it Northvale Legacy Manufacturing. The word legacy held differently in their mouths than it had in the brochures. They asked me back, not as a savior, just as a man who knew how to lay rails under a train already moving. I sat in a borrowed office with a window that looked at the loading dock and drew the bones of a system I wish we'd had all along. Vendor onboarding with real verification, not a signature party. Segregation of duties that couldn't be temporarily overridden. 3-way match hard-coded, with alerts that tattled to more than one person. Audit trails you couldn't rewrite without the software writing you back. We built dashboards that showed exceptions and colors even tired eyes couldn't ignore. People rolled their chairs over on a Tuesday and said, "This makes sense." And I felt a kind of quiet joy I hadn't expected to feel again inside a spreadsheet. The pension was a harder arithmetic. What had been taken doesn't return just because a courtroom says please. Still, the fund administrators and the courts pulled back more than any of us dared predict. Not whole, but enough that the oldest retirees wouldn't have to sell the houses their grandchildren had learned to ride bikes around. I watched men my age cry without apology in a conference room that used to sell team building. Noah Briggs nodded at me when I signed out at the front desk, now with a badge that read, "Visitor." "Good to see you, Mr. Hale." His voice carried no pity this time, just recognition. On the floor, a young operator pointed out a gouge on a guide rail, and a supervisor logged it without looking to see who was watching. That small act felt louder than any press release. Driving home, I listened to the local radio describe our plant in the same breath as a county fair and a high school basketball game. The way communities announce what they plan to keep. The sun fell behind the water tower with the town's name on it, paint chipped and proud. I thought of Harold, hands on a machined edge, and of Lena's rule that never learned how to bend. Repair is not dramatic. It is a sequence. But there's a holiness in people choosing it, one procedure at a time. The last time I walked out of Northvale Legacy, the light had that late afternoon warmth that forgives concrete. I handed my visitor badge to Noah, and he smiled a simple, regular smile. Outside, Anna idled at the curb, window down, hair caught in the breeze. "How's it looking there?" she asked as I buckled in. Like something sturdy is learning its own name, I said. We drove without the radio, the landscape doing enough talking, warehouse roofs, a water tower with our paint still chipped, the diner where Caleb and I once divided fear into sections and ate it with eggs. At home I carried an old banker's box to the hall closet, files from a life I wasn't required to hold anymore. I labeled the spine Northvale, C closed, and slid it beside Lena's cookbooks and the winter coats that still smell like cedar. The house felt lighter by a weight you only know is gone when you breathe without bracing first. In my small office, the photo of Lena caught evening and gave it back. "We did it right," I told her, not expecting an answer and getting one anyway in the ordinary way. The quiet answered back. "Any regrets?" Anna asked, later on the porch, legs tucked under like she used to sit doing homework. I thought about what revenge feels like in stories. Fast, hot, sweet as a bad idea, and what responsibility feels like in a real room, slow, procedural, a series of signatures and early mornings, strangers you learn to call by their first names because you are going to need each other. "No," I said. "I didn't do it to win. I did it so the numbers could live in daylight." Anna nodded, lawyer and daughter at once. "Daylight's defensible," she said, and I laughed because she was right, and because the word home has a way of making truth sound plainer. I start tomorrow as a part-time ethics consultant for a manufacturing association. Small shops, mostly, family firms, a few mid-sizers with ambition and not enough guardrails. I've already drafted the welcome slide. Segregation of duties isn't suspicion, it's love. I'll show them how to set approvals no one can override, just this once. How to let alerts tattle without shame. How to treat vendor verification like introductions at a wedding. Look folks in the eye, say their name, ask who they came with. None of it glamorous. All of it insurance against the kind of story we just lived. Before bed, I walked the house one more time. The porch light hummed the old hum. The neighborhood dog committee conducted its evening meeting down the block. In the kitchen, I poured a single finger of whiskey and held it to the window. "To Harold," I said. "To Lena. To people who learn to tell the truth, even when it costs more than they'd planned." I took a small sip and washed the glass. Tomorrow needed a clear head. I turned off lights, closed the laptop, and let the dark be just dark. Not an omen, not a threat, just the necessary privacy of night. Somewhere, a machine in our town would start at 6 sharp, a clean rhythm returning to hands that had waited for it. The work would go on, not because of me, but because enough of us chose the kind of care that outlasts applause.